Have you ever reached the end of a long workday and without thinking, picked up your phone just for a few minutes, just to relax, just to escape, but somehow those few minutes turn into an hour or two, and before you know it, the evening is gone. No real rest, no real connection, just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. I didn't notice it at first. It felt normal. After work, I was tired. My mind felt heavy. So I told myself I deserved a break, and my phone was always there. Easy, comforting, familiar. I would sit down, open one app, then another. Short videos, messages, news, random posts, nothing important. But somehow, I couldn't stop, even when I wanted to. Sometimes I would look at the clock and think, why am I still here? But instead of putting the phone down, I stayed. Because it was easier than facing the silence, easier than thinking, easier than asking myself how I really felt. And slowly, something strange started to happen. My evenings felt shorter, but also emptier. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't wasting time in an obvious way, but I wasn't really living those hours either. They just disappeared. One night, I sat on my bed with my phone in my hand. I had already been scrolling for almost an hour, but I couldn't remember anything I had just seen. Not one video, not one post, not one meaningful moment. It was like my mind was full, but also blank. And that thought stayed with me. The next day at work, I felt more tired than usual. Not physically, but mentally, like my brain never really rested. Even though I had spent the whole evening doing nothing, that's when I started to wonder, what would happen if I just stopped? Not forever, just after work, just for a few hours each night. No scrolling, no checking notifications, no mindless distractions. At first, the idea felt uncomfortable, almost impossible. What would I even do without my phone? It sounds like a simple question, but when I really thought about it, I didn't have a clear answer. That scared me a little because it made me realize something important. I wasn't just using my phone, I was depending on it to fill silence, to avoid boredom, to escape my own thoughts. So I made a small decision. For 7 days, after work, I would ignore my phone, not completely. I would still use it for important things, calls, urgent messages. But no social media, no endless scrolling, no just one more video. Only real, intentional use, nothing more. I didn't expect anything big. I wasn't trying to change my life. I just wanted to see what would happen in those quiet hours. Would I feel bored, restless, lonely, or maybe something else? That evening, when I got home from work, I placed my phone on the table, screen facing down, and for a moment, I just stood there, not knowing what to do next. The room felt unusually quiet, almost too quiet. My hand reached for the phone, automatically, then stopped. And in that small moment, something began. Not a big change, not a dramatic realization, just a simple shift from noise to silence, from distraction to awareness. I didn't know it yet, but those next 7 days were going to show me something I had been avoiding for a long time. The first evening without my phone felt longer than usual, not in a relaxing way, in a strange, uncomfortable way. After I finished dinner, I sat down on the couch. Normally, this was the moment I would reach for my phone, without thinking, without questioning it. But this time, I didn't. And suddenly, I didn't know what to do. The silence felt louder than I expected. There was no background noise, no videos playing, no constant stream of new content, just quiet. At first, I tried to distract myself in other ways. I turned on the TV, but after a few minutes, I lost interest. It felt different from scrolling, less stimulating, slower, so I turned it off. Then I walked around the room, sat down again. It stood up again. It felt like I was waiting for something, but I didn't know what. A few times, I instinctively reached for my phone. Each time, I stopped myself halfway. It wasn't easy. It felt like breaking a habit I didn't even realize was so strong. After a while, I noticed something interesting. My mind started to wander, not in a stressful way, but in a quiet, natural way. Thoughts I hadn't paid attention to in a long time began to appear. Simple things. Things like, how was my day? Really? Why did that conversation at work bother me? What do I actually want to do this weekend? These weren't big, life-changing questions, but they felt real. More real than anything I usually saw on my screen. I went to the kitchen and made a cup of tea, slowly. No rush, no distractions. I stood there, watching the steam rise from the cup, and for the first time in a while, I wasn't thinking about anything else, just that moment, just the warmth in my hands, just the quiet. Later that night, I picked up a book, not because I forced myself to, but because I was curious. I hadn't read in a long time, at least not without checking my phone every few minutes. This time, I read for almost 30 minutes. No interruptions, no urge to switch to something else, just reading. And it felt surprisingly calm, not exciting, not addictive, but peaceful. When I finally went to bed, something felt different. My mind wasn't overloaded. There were no random images flashing in my head, no endless stream of content, just space. I fell asleep faster than usual. The next day, I noticed something small, but important. I felt slightly more focused at work, not dramatically, but enough to notice. I didn't feel as mentally scattered, and that made me think. Maybe my evenings were affecting my days more than I realized. That night, I repeated the same rule. Phone down after work. Again, it wasn't easy, but it felt a little less uncomfortable than the first day. The silence was still there, but it didn't feel as heavy. This time, I decided to go for a short walk. No music, no phone, just walking. At first, it felt boring. My mind kept searching for stimulation, something to fill the gap. But after a few minutes, I started to notice things I usually ignored. The sound of the wind, the lights from nearby houses, people passing by, small details, nothing special, but somehow it felt grounding, like I was actually present. Not just moving through the moment, but experiencing it. When I got back home, I didn't feel the same urge to grab my phone. Not as strongly, it was still there, but weaker. And that surprised me, because I always thought my habit was too strong to change. But maybe it just needed space. Space to breathe. Space to reset. I began to understand something simple. My phone wasn't the problem. The way I used it was. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was slowly taking control back. Not all at once, just one evening at a time. By the third day, something began to shift, not dramatically, but enough for me to notice. The urge to check my phone was still there. But it didn't feel as automatic. It was more like a quiet suggestion instead of a strong pull. That evening, after work, I placed my phone in a different room, not just on the table, out of reach, out of sight. I didn't want to rely only on willpower. I wanted to make it easier for myself. At first, it felt a little uncomfortable, like I was missing something important, even though I knew I wasn't. So I sat down, took a deep breath, and waited. But this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't empty anymore. It felt open, like there was space for something new. I looked around my room, really looked, and I realized how long it had been since I paid attention to small details. The way the light entered through the window, the quiet rhythm of the fan, the stillness of everything around me. Normally, these things would go unnoticed, covered by noise, covered by distraction. But now, they felt strangely comforting. I decided to do something simple. I cleaned my desk, not because it was messy, but because I wanted to. Slowly, I moved things around, organized papers, wiped the surface, adjusted a few small objects. And as I did that, my mind felt clearer. It wasn't just about the desk, it was something deeper. Like I was creating order, not just outside, but inside. After that, I sat down again, and this time, I didn't feel the need to do something immediately. I just sat there, thinking, not forced thinking, just letting thoughts come and go. And that's when something unexpected happened. I started remembering things I had been avoiding, not big problems, but small, unfinished thoughts. Conversations I didn't fully process, feelings I pushed aside, plans I kept delaying. Without my phone to distract me, there was nowhere to hide from them. At first, that felt uncomfortable, even a little heavy. But then I realized something important. These thoughts weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to help me. They were asking for attention, for closure, for honesty. So instead of avoiding them, I stayed with them, just for a while. And slowly, they became less overwhelming, more understandable. Later that night, I decided to write a few things down. Nothing formal, just simple notes. What I felt that day, what I was thinking about, what I wanted to change. It wasn't perfect, it didn't need to be, but it felt real. More real than anything I had done on my phone in weeks. On the fourth day, something even more surprising happened. I started to enjoy the evenings, not in a loud, exciting way, but in a quiet, steady way. I cooked dinner without watching anything, and somehow the food tasted better, not because it changed, but because I was actually present. I ate slowly, not rushing, not distracted, just eating. After that, I sat by the window, doing nothing. And for once, doing nothing didn't feel like a waste of time. It felt like rest, real rest, the kind that doesn't come from scrolling, but from being still. I began to understand something I hadn't noticed before. My phone wasn't just taking my time, it was taking my attention, and without attention, even good moments feel empty. But when I gave my full attention to simple things, they became enough. Not amazing, not life-changing, just enough. And somehow, that felt peaceful. By the end of that day, I noticed a quiet confidence growing, a feeling that maybe I didn't need constant stimulation to feel okay. Maybe I didn't need to escape every quiet moment. Maybe the life I already had wasn't as boring as I thought. It just needed my attention. By the fifth day, the experiment no longer felt like a challenge. It started to feel natural, not easy, but familiar. When I finished work that evening, I didn't immediately think about my phone. That alone surprised me. Just a few days ago, it was the first thing on my mind. Now, it was just another object, something I could choose to use or not. That night, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. I called a friend, not through messages, not through quick replies or emojis, but an actual phone call. At first, it felt a bit unusual. We're so used to texting now, short conversations, fast responses, no real pauses. But this was different. We talked slowly. There were moments of silence, moments of thinking, moments where neither of us rushed to fill the space. And somehow, it felt more real, more human. We talked about simple things, work, daily life, random thoughts. Nothing special, but at the same time, it felt meaningful. When the call ended, I noticed something. I didn't feel drained. I felt connected in a way that scrolling never gave me. That night, I didn't feel the need to check anything. No notifications, no updates, no curiosity about what I might be missing. Because for the first time in a while, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. On the sixth day, I came home feeling more tired than usual. Work had been stressful. Normally, this would be the perfect excuse to escape into my phone, to avoid thinking, to numb the feeling. And for a moment, that urge came back. Strong, clear, almost automatic. I stood there, looking at my phone, thinking about how easy it would be. Just one tap, just a few minutes. But then I paused, and I asked myself something simple. Will this actually help? Not in the moment, but after. Would I feel better? Or just distracted? I didn't have a perfect answer, but I had enough awareness to choose differently. So instead of picking up my phone, I sat down, closed my eyes, and just breathed, slowly. At first, my mind was noisy. Thoughts about work, stress, things I couldn't control. But after a few minutes, the noise softened, not completely gone, but quieter, more manageable. And in that quiet, I felt something I didn't expect: relief, not from escaping, but from facing things gently. That night, I went to bed early. No scrolling, no late night distractions, just rest. And the next morning, I woke up feeling clearer, lighter, not because my problems disappeared, but because I didn't carry unnecessary noise with me. By the seventh day, something became very clear. This wasn't just about using my phone less. It was about changing how I experienced my life. Before, my evenings were filled with content, but empty of presence. Now, they were simpler, but fuller, full of small moments, real moments, moments I could actually remember. I realized something important. Time doesn't feel long or short based on how much we do. It depends on how present we are. When I was constantly on my phone, hours disappeared without meaning. But when I slowed down, even simple evenings felt richer, more alive. And maybe that was the biggest surprise. Not that my life changed completely, but that it didn't need to. It was already enough. I just needed to be there for it. By the end of the 7 days, I didn't feel like I had completed a challenge. It didn't feel like an achievement. It felt more like I had returned to something simple, something I didn't even realize I had lost: my time, not just the hours in the evening, but the feeling of owning those hours. Before this experiment, my evenings were automatic. Work ended, and without thinking, my phone took over. It decided what I saw, what I thought about, how I spent my attention, and I followed. Not because I had to, but because I was used to it. Now, things felt different. Not perfect, not completely changed, but more intentional. I still use my phone. I didn't delete anything. I didn't try to remove it from my life, but I no longer needed it the same way. And that small difference changed everything. I started noticing things I had ignored for a long time. Evenings felt slower, but not boring. Quiet, but not empty. There was space to think, space to feel, space to rest in a real way. I also noticed something else. My mind felt lighter, not because life became easier, but because I wasn't constantly filling it with noise. Less information, less comparison, less distraction, and in that space, I could hear myself more clearly: what I needed, what I was avoiding, what actually mattered to me. These weren't big, dramatic realizations, just small truths, but they felt honest, and that honesty made a difference. I also became more aware of how I wanted to spend my time, not based on habit, but based on choice. Some evenings I read, Some evenings I went for a walk. Some evenings I did nothing at all. And for the first time, doing nothing didn't feel like wasting time. It felt like rest, real rest, the kind that helps you recover, not just escape. Of course, not every moment was perfect. There were still times when I felt bored, times when I wanted quick entertainment, times when the silence felt a little too quiet. But now, I understood those moments better. They weren't problems. They were part of being present, part of being human. And instead of running away from them, I could stay, even just for a little while. And that made them easier to handle. When the 7 days ended, I asked myself a simple question. Will I go back to the way things were? The answer was no, not completely. I knew I would still use my phone. I knew I would still have days when I scrolled too much. That's normal. But now, I had a choice. I had experienced something different, something quieter, something more real. And once you feel that, it's hard to ignore it. So maybe this isn't about giving up your phone. Maybe it's not about strict rules or perfect habits. Maybe it's just about awareness, about noticing how you spend your time and asking yourself, is this how I want to live my evenings? If the answer is yes, then nothing needs to change. But if the answer is no, maybe you don't need a big solution. Maybe you can start small. One evening, 1 hour, even just a few minutes. Put your phone down, sit in the quiet, see what happens. You might feel uncomfortable at first. That's okay. Stay with it. Because on the other side of that discomfort, there might be something you've been missing. If this story made you reflect on your own habits, take a moment to notice how you spend your time tonight. And if you want more gentle, real life stories to help you learn English in a calm and meaningful way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll continue slowly, one quiet evening at a time.